In this video, I'm going to show you how to make this amazing Dragonstone waterfall ecosystem. Be sure to stick around to the end, it's going to be a good one. A few weeks ago, I found this plastic container in a shop and I knew that I had to make something with it. It's got a base that spins, so here's my idea. I want to create a rock structure in the centre that can be viewed from 360 degrees. I also want to add a pump at the bottom so it'll have water flowing down over it. To start off, I'm going to cut some coarse filter foam to size that will sit at the bottom of the container. This will act as the drainage layer and allow water to freely pass through it into the intake of the pump. I'm using a sharp blade to roughly mark out the shape and then using some scissors to cut it out. As you can see, it fits nice and snug into the plastic container. The next thing to do is to start working on the hardscape. I've got a decent sized piece of Dragonstone which I'm going to be using. Now you can clearly see the rough idea that I'm going for. As it is, I do think it's a little bit too big and I'd have a lot of trouble creating a hole down the centre for the outlet of the pump. So what I'm going to do is use a hammer to break the Dragonstone up into multiple pieces which I can use to build a structure. The stones are extremely dusty and dirty, so before building I'm going to give them a good rinse down. Whilst the Dragonstone dries off, I'm going to get to work installing the pump. I've got this small USB aquarium pump which should be perfect for what I've got in mind. I'll leave a link to this one in the description, plus all the other materials and plants that I'll be using for this build. With the pump installed, I now need to work on the outlet which will get the water to the top of the Dragonstone. I'm starting off by attaching a small piece of tubing to the outlet with some super glue. I'm then attaching it back on the pump and placing on some more tubing which fits nice and snug. It will need some more work towards the top later, but for now I can start working on the hardscape. As you can see, I ended up with a fair few pieces from that single large rock. Before building, I cut some leftover filter foam to size to sit on top of the pump. This should stop things like substrate and rocks from getting down into the intake. With that done, I can finally start building. I'm placing in the Dragonstone to surround the tubing and then using the super glue and tissue method to secure them together once I'm happy. I'm simply wedging some tissue between the contact points and then soaking it in super glue. I'm making sure to lock the rocks together in multiple locations to ensure that they don't break apart. It dries in no time at all and the result is a strong bond which is 100% plant safe. Now I'm going to continue building up and around the tubing. One thing that's always hard to get across with video is how long and how much trial and error it takes to build some scapes. It can look like I just throw the pieces on and glue them in place, but that's simply not the case. What I like to do is take some time and experiment with multiple different layouts and structures before I glue anything down. This could be 10 minutes, an hour, or even in some cases a few days. Although you certainly don't have to spend days hardscaping your build, the point I'm trying to make is that once the ecosystem is complete, it's really hard to make any changes, so it's a good idea to come up with something you're happy with right from the start. Here's the main hardscape for this build complete, and I've got to say I'm really happy with how it's looking. However, there is a big problem as it's got a bunch of holes in it, meaning the water won't flow down over the rocks. An easy solution to this is to fill in all the gaps with some expanding foam. This will not only ensure that the water flows down over the Dragonstone properly, but it will also help strengthen the entire structure. This stuff does expand a lot, so try not to apply too much. A couple hours have passed and it's fully cured, and as you can probably see, I once again applied too much. This isn't a problem as it's super easy to tear off anyway. Here's how it looks with all the foam carved down. It doesn't look the best at the moment, but I'll be covering it up later on. Before doing that, I'm going to go back to working on the output of the water feature. I'm going to heat up the end of this screwdriver and poke several holes through the tubing. I'm hoping the water will slowly trickle out and down over the Dragonstones. With the holes done, I'm now going to take some scissors and cut off the excess tubing off the top. I'm then applying a small amount of super glue and plugging up the top with some leftover filter foam. With the hole covered up, I'm now going to use some more Dragonstone to help hide everything. The important thing here is not blocking up the output or the path of the water. As you can see, I managed to leave some reasonable sized gaps where the water can flow out and down. The next thing to do is to start covering up the not so nice looking expanding foam. To make this as easy as possible, I'm going to remove the entire structure from the container and take off the pump. Here I've got some liquid super glue and some crushed Dragonstone that I got from breaking up the rocks earlier. All I'm doing is applying some super glue onto the foam that I want to cover up and then sprinkling on some of the crushed Dragonstone. After gently pressing it in, I can brush off the excess, and as you can see, it covers up the foam really nicely. This is a super easy and simple way of creating a seamless joint between the rocks. I absolutely love how it's looking with all the foam covered up, but before moving on, I'm going to give it a quick spray down as it's really quite dusty. With the Dragonstone nice and clean, I can reinstall the pump and place the hardscape back inside the container. You might notice that there are a few places where you can still see the foam, but this isn't a problem as it will be easy to cover later with some moss and plants. Before going any further, I think it's about time to do a water test on the pump and see how it flows. It went everywhere and I'm not sure why I didn't see it coming, but it was an easy fix by loosely placing some coarse filter foam inside the gaps. Now when turning the pump on, instead of spraying water everywhere, it flows nice and smoothly down over the Dragonstone. With the water test complete and successful, I'm going to turn the pump off and siphon out the water. Now it's time to get the substrate in. In my opinion, the ideal substrate for this build is aqua soil. It doesn't mind being saturated and having water constantly flowing through it. It'll also provide a good amount of nutrients for the plants I'm going to use later. Now the substrate is in, I'm going to place in some small pieces of Dragonstone at the base of the scape to add some more detail. These should hopefully look like pieces that have fallen off the main rock structure, and it also helps create a smoother transition from the aqua soil up to the large Dragonstone. Before getting the plants in, I do want to add a little more detail with some spiderwood branches. I don't know about you, but I always find that adding small branches like these is a great way of improving the detail of any scape. As you can probably have guessed, I made sure to secure them down onto the rocks. With the hardscape complete, I'm now going to fill the container up and turn the pump on before getting planting. Now it's finally time to start getting the plants in. This is a tub of Monte Carlo trimmings that I got from my nano aquarium. I'm going to plant them on top of the aqua soil throughout the scape. With time, I'm hoping it's going to form a dense lush carpet and you won't be able to see the aqua soil at all. Just to be clear, this is an aquatic plant that also grows great immersed in terrariums. However, I've never actually tried growing it in the open air like this, so this project is going to be a bit of an experiment. I'm thinking that as the substrate is going to be constantly damp, the Monte Carlo should never dry out. I think some plants growing on the Dragonstone will look great, so I'm going to do that next. This here is a tub of Bucephalandra. Before using it, I'm going to take it out the tub and rinse out the nutrient-rich gel that it's grown in. Now I'm just separating the plants into smaller sections and then I'm going to start placing them on the Dragonstone. This plant is an epiphyte, so it doesn't actually need the substrate to grow. It will simply pull nutrients from the water flowing through it. Similar to the Monte Carlo, I'm not completely sure how this plant's going to do out in the open air, but there's only one way to find out. This build is definitely in need of some moss, so let's plant that next. This here is some Christmas moss. It's a relatively slow growing species of moss that likes to stay compact instead of growing leggy. All I'm going to do is tear off small chunks and then place it in locations where it's in contact with the water. I'm also going to use it to cover up the black filter foam. Luckily, I'm not needing to use anything to attach this moss in place. The texture of the Dragonstone is simply enough to hold it in place and stop it flowing down the rocks. In no time at all, it will latch itself to the stone and start to spread. I think it will look better with some contrast throughout the Monte Carlo carpet, so I'm going to plant some of this Liliopsis. I'm pulling out the small runners and then planting them down into the aqua soil. I'm really liking the variety of leaf shape and texture that they bring to the bottom of the scape. With the planting complete, all that's left to do is to let it grow in. I'm hoping that all the plants will establish nicely. Six weeks have passed and I'm glad to say that this waterfall ecosystem is thriving. Just as I'd hoped, the Monte Carlo carpet has completely filled out the bottom of the scape. As I said when I planted it, it was a bit of an experiment and I wasn't sure how it was going to grow, so it's great to see how well it's done. This definitely opens the door for more scapes in the open air like this. It's not just the Monte Carlo that's done well, as the Liliopsis has also started to establish really nicely. Also, to my surprise, the Bucephalandra on the Dragonstone is still growing strong. There is the odd leaf that has dried out and died, but all the new ones that are coming through look super healthy. The Christmas moss, which I expected to thrive, is the only one not doing so well. A few of the patches have gone brown and died, and I'm not completely sure why. With that said, it is growing well and spreading in other locations. The only downside to a setup like this is that I do have to top it up every few days as the water evaporates really quite fast. Overall, I'm extremely happy with how this setup's turned out, and it really does make a great display piece. Let me know in the comments if you enjoyed this build and want to see more like it. As always, be sure to subscribe, and thank you for watching.